It's Create Day, my friends. Welcome to my channel. I have 5 fall DIYs for you today, so let's get started. For my first project, I am using this foam pumpkin that I got off of Amazon. If I can find the link for it, I will leave that in the description box along with everything else I use in these projects today. The first thing I'm going to do is remove that stem. I'm going to add some castings onto the top of this pumpkin. So I've got out my IOD Air Dry Clay and I'm going to make some molds. This is the IOD Dainty Flourishes mold. And as always, I go ahead and dust these molds with some cornstarch before I put my clay in there. It really does help it release quite easily. I'm gluing my castings down with some Gorilla Wood glue. I water it down just a little bit and it spreads really easily for me that way. And it does work really well, but there are lots of other glues out there that you can use. I know that most crafters probably use Type Bond, but this is what I have, so that's why I'm using it. Now I'm going to make several leaf castings from this little silicone mold that I got from Amazon. And again, that will be linked in the description box. I used 2 of the 3 different styles that come with this mold. And I'm just going to make a bunch of them, lay them on there, and kind of layer overlapping each other so that this goes all the way around that top of the pumpkin. After I had all the castings glued on, I immediately went with my paint. I did not wait for these to finish drying. And I'm using Dixie Belle's buttercream over the entire pumpkin. And since the castings weren't dry, you do just want to be very careful and not press too hard um, because you want to get that paint down into all those details. So it kind of depends on what brush you might use, but just, be careful to not distort your castings. Now I'm going to be doing some decoupage, and this is just a pack of napkins that I picked up at my local supermarket. They're called eucalyptus greens, and I'm going to remove the bottom 2 plies. I use a piece, the first ply came off really easy, but the second one I needed to start with a piece of Scotch tape to get it to release. I'm using a water pen to just go around all these edges to tear this off and give it a more organic edge. And I'm also going to use it to remove that white piece there on that one section. You can use a paintbrush dipped in water, or you can just, just tear it with your fingers, whatever works best for you. With that done, I am going to do random pieces and strips of this napkin. I'm just going, no rhyme or reason, just running that water pen down around a section, tearing it out. I'm going to be putting these on the pumpkin kind of in a patchwork design, leaving some spaces in between some of the pieces. Other pieces will kind of line up together. It's just going to be very random, and I'm not, my intent wasn't to cover the entire pumpkin with this. You'll see when we get a little further down the road here. So now I'm just going to go ahead and apply all those pieces using my matte Mod Podge. And I will try to fit those up into the areas around those leaves the best I can, tearing off any little extra pieces that might be overhanging onto the leaves, and just fitting them in the best I can and not worrying about everything being perfect. Then once I get each little piece glued down with the Mod Podge, I just take a little bit of Mod Podge and go around the edges to seal those down well. I don't want to do another coat on top of the napkin while it's still wet with the base coat of Mod Podge, because these are really fragile and it will tear really easy. So I'm just going to seal the edges at first and then let it dry before I go over the entire pumpkin with the final coat of Mod Podge. And now I'm showing you this little section here on the front that I purposely left uncovered with the napkin. That's because I'm going to be doing a transfer there. So here's where I have all my napkin decoupaged on there, and I'm going over the entire decoupaged area with a final coat of Mod Podge. Once that was dry, I'm taking my French linen chalk paint and a couple of little sponge brushes. I am going to water down this paint and kind of make almost like a glaze so that I can pounce this onto the pumpkin over the napkin and kind of tone down the brightness of that green. It just adds another bit of variation to this. So I'm dipping it into the paint, the watered down paint, and then offloading so that I don't get, a thick coverage. And I'm just going to go around, pouncing around the entire piece just to add a little bit of haze to that kind of bright green eucalyptus napkin. And then I use a brush to do the same type of thing up in the little areas where that napkin's right up against those castings. Now I'm taking my chalk paint in the color Java to do kind of a wash over all of the castings. I'm watering that down so that it will freely brush onto these, and then I can go back in and wipe back the excess. I want to make sure this dark color gets down into all of those details. And I went ahead and painted the entire thing before wiping it back, so I wasn't able to remove as much as you might like because it had started to dry, but it was fine for me. But if you want this to be just, really faint and not have that color on any of your high spots, you would probably just want to work in sections, just doing a little bit like that much there and then wiping it back before doing the entire thing like I did. And I just used a baby wipe for this to wipe back all that excess paint. The next color is Woodsy Smoke, and I am going to do the same type of technique, only I am going to wipe this off immediately after I apply it onto these castings because I did not want this color drying on there. I just wanted to add this on for some more variation. Next, I'm using a color called Honeycomb, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to brush this on and then wipe it back. Lastly, I'm going to dry brush over these with my French linen chalk paint. So I just get a little bit on my brush, wipe off the excess onto a paper towel, and then go in and highlight all those little raised areas. I needed to paint that inside area where I had removed the stem, so I used the color Woodsy Smoke for that. Now I'm going to use Belle's Dixie Dirt in the color Ash to go around all of those castings where the casting meets the pumpkin. I did not feel like I could paint those. You can only get so far down without getting it onto the pumpkin, and then it would leave a line, which I did not want. I wanted to kind of grunge this up. So this is what I ended up doing, and I put my Mod Podge on there with one brush, then I dip another brush into the Dixie Dirt and apply it over the Mod Podge, and then you just kind of shake off the excess. Before I apply my transfer, I want to do some little splatters over this. I'm starting with Fusion's Cast Iron. I'm watering this down and then using a fan brush to tap this little droplets all over my pumpkin. I do the same thing with dark brown, and when that's done, I use Fusion's Casement, which is a white, to finish it up. I picked out a transfer from IOD's traditional pots. This is the one I want to use. I'm just going to tape that on in that center area that I left open. And then using my little transfer tool, I'm just going to burnish this on here. It was a lot easier than I expected it to be with all those little ridges in the pumpkin. I had no problem at all. It just went on really easy. I'm using some fine grit sandpaper just to rough up this transfer a little bit. It was way too new looking and kind of dark and heavy for the way the rest of this pumpkin looked. Now it's time for some antique gold rub and buff over all of my castings. Once I was finished with this step, I took it outside and gave it a coat of my Rust-Oleum Clear Matte spray paint. Now it's time to add the stem. I did have to kind of cut down into that middle a little bit to make a deeper hole. But I'm just going to use my hot glue and apply this little wood stick that I found right into the center of that. I fill in more glue around it and then I add some of my Spanish moss. I decided to do a hang tag for this one. So I have one, I already painted it buttercream, and I'm going to decoupage a couple of pieces from this napkin, front and back. And this tag I made it smaller. The way it came was this one right here. And it was too big for this pumpkin. So I just trimmed off the bottom to make it a little shorter and then those sides so it was a little bit narrower. So now I'm just going to apply my Mod Podge front and back and get those little pieces of napkin on there and then let that dry. Once that Mod Podge was dry, I just went ahead and sanded around the edges to remove the excess paper. Then I just used some jute twine to pull through that little hole on the top. I made a knot where I wanted it to attach to the stem, so then I could just tie that on there. Now I'm using some Fabri-Tac glue to apply this covered wire that I'm going to use to make the little tendrils. I'm going to wrap that around the stem and then take each end and wrap it around the end of my paintbrush to make it all curly-Q. And with that, I thought I was done, but then I remembered I wanted to antique the edges of that little hang tag. So I'm using my StazOn ink in Timber Brown and just a little sponge applicator to go around all those edges. This little project is done, and here's how it turned out. So now on to a simpler project. I'm going to be using some scrap wood. I have these two pieces, and then I have a larger piece also. I'm going to do the two smaller ones in Dixie Belle's terracotta and sea glass, and then the larger piece will be in Dixie Belle's buttercream. I'm just going to go ahead and give these all a couple of coats, front, back, sides, top, and bottom. I love this terracotta paint for fall. It's not that bright, pumpkin orange. It's just really pretty. And I like bringing in this sea glass color as well. The two colors together I just really like. Once the paint had dried, I took it out to the garage and gave them a good sanding with my orbital sander to give a more distressed look to the edges of the scrap wood. I have these little leaf chipboard pieces that I picked up from the Dollar Tree. One of them was missing the stem, but I really liked that particular style of leaf that came in this package, so I am going to figure out how to make that one work. And here's what the package from Dollar Tree looks like. So before I glue these on, I'm going to go ahead and give them a coat front and back with my antique wax. I want to do some dry brushing with my Woodsy Smoke color, so I have that on my plate. I'm just taking an old chip brush, dipping it in, wiping back the excess paint, and then just lightly going over this, brushing in just one direction with the grain of the wood to add a little bit of age. After that, I just dipped my finger into the antiquing wax and rubbed that around the edges. For the larger board that is painted buttercream, I want to use this napkin that I got off of Amazon. I will leave a link in the description box. I thought these were really pretty and it incorporated the colors that I'm using on these projects. I tore around all the edges like I always do, and now I'm just going to apply this with my Mod Podge. I'm going to lay that down, smooth it out the best I can. I'm not concerned if there are some wrinkles in this. It doesn't bother me at all. So I'm just going in sections to try and get it as smooth as I can. And then once that's all down, I will go around and seal up those edges. Once it had had some time to dry, I went ahead and sealed over the entire napkin with the Mod Podge. But then I wanted to add a little extra piece here, so I just ripped out this leaf and Mod Podged that down just to kind of fill in that little bottom section there. While I'm waiting for that one to dry, I went ahead and drilled out a couple of holes in the top of these other two pieces of wood. I have a little stick that I cut up, and I'm just going to use Fabri-Tac glue to apply those into the holes. And now I'm using the same Fabri-Tac glue to apply the leaves. I'm using my antique gold rub and buff to go over the tops of the leaves, just getting a little bit on my finger and just going lightly over each leaf. Time to dress up the top of the stem, so I'm using my hot glue to apply some Spanish moss. So now I wanted to do some raffia, and this stuff is not my friend. I do not like working with it, but after the experience I had with these, I think we can be friends now because I discovered that if you curl it with a curling iron, it doesn't get this like crazy straight out thing going on. So, but before I do that, I'm just applying some little florals onto here. I have, just some picks that I had in my stash. Cut the little flowers off so that they were somewhat flat on the back. And I'm applying those around the center there where the little pumpkin stem is. Then I made a little bow out of this gingham ribbon. Just a very simple like shoestring type bow. And I'm going to glue that on there, kind of tuck it up in there between the flowers. So now here's where I got out my old curling iron that still worked, and I'm just strand by strand going to wrap this around. I wasn't sure when it was hot because the little light that tells you it's ready doesn't work anymore. So it didn't work really well at first, but the hotter it got, the better it worked. And you can see the difference how it just looks so much nicer than just when it's all straight and stringy looking. So I'm pretty happy about that. Like that turned out pretty good. I do the same thing to the other one. I use different flowers for this one and, some different picks, but it's the same process, just hot gluing everything on there and curling up those little raffia pieces. And once I get all these in place, these two little pieces are done. Now I'm going to use my Stays On ink in Timber Brown to apply this stamp that says Autumn down the side of this board. I'm using IOD's Letterpress stamp for this, and I inked up the TUMN. I had the A on there just for placement, and now I'm going to remove the other letters and just ink up the A and the U, but I have the T on there to help guide me in place for the placement of this as well. I always manage to jack up when I try to do words with stamps, so I was really nervous about this, but somehow I was able to line this up just right and it turned out perfect. I was so happy with it. That's all I'm going to do to this piece, so now we can take a look at how all three of these turned out. My last project is this wooden Christmas box that I've had for a really long time. I don't even use it for Christmas. I would normally like just put a plant in it and turn it with that cutout facing the back where you can't see it. So it was time to do something fun with this. I've got some of these little wood planks that I got from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to use those to cover up that opening. And then I also have my wood pile large or extra large craft sticks from Hobby Lobby, and then these little smaller sticks that I don't know where they came from. So the first thing I'm going to do is apply my wood glue onto this area around the Christmas tree cutout and glue that wood plank over. It almost entirely covers that opening, but we will be covering the rest of it with the other craft sticks. My plan for this is to make it look like a barn door, and it was really a lot of fun to figure this out and make it work. So I go ahead and I lay this down, and just to check, I kind of want to get it as centered as I can. So I'm just using the craft sticks that I'm going to be using to make sure I get it centered on there the best that I can. I used my little miter shears to trim off the ends of the craft sticks so that they would sit flush on there from the top and the bottom of the box. Once I had one cut that fit, I went ahead and just marked the other ones and cut them. This handheld cutter works really well. I've used it many times. So if I can find a link for it, I will leave that in the description box in case you're interested. I'm doing a total of 4 of the extra large craft sticks for the sides next to the plank in the middle because they are thinner and I wanted to build them up to be as flush with that plank as I could. So I'm going to glue 2 of those to each side. I also cut a top and bottom piece that I will be gluing on there as well. So now I'm using my Gorilla Wood Glue to put everything in place. On this bottom piece, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't down too low, which would impede the sitting flat on a surface. So I just took the extra plank and used that as if it were the surface it would be sitting on to make sure that it was flush with the bottom of the box. Now I'm just measuring to find the center point so I know where to put my little crossbar on my barn door. So I'm just using one of these really small rectangular craft sticks, and I'm going to mark on the other side where I need to cut that. And there we go, it's a perfect fit. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue that down with my wood glue. Now for the other pieces, I need to switch this down to a 45-degree angle. I'm going to be cutting more of that same small little stick, and I need the ends of it to fit into the corners where the cross beam is and up into the upper corner, and then the same with the bottom, fitting down into the bottom corner and up to that cross beam. So I'm making a 45-degree cut on each side so that it's like an arrow. And so now I'm going to lay that in place, and then I can mark where I need to cut the opposite end. And it does take me a couple of tries of cutting it to get it to fit just right. I didn't want to cut it too short because you can't add it back, but you can always take off more if you cut a little long. So it did take me like 2 tries to get the cut right. When I had both of those pieces cut, I went ahead and glued them down with the wood glue. And here's where I'm gluing on the little top portion that I cut to make it almost like a little roof overhang. It's starting to look like a barn door. Now it's time for paint. I'm using Dixie Belle's Terracotta to cover this entire box on the outside because I'm going to be adding some candle wax on top of this and then another coat of paint using the sea glass so that we can obtain a nice little chippy, weathered look on my barn door. When the paint was dry, I just took this little tea light and I'm going to just rub this all over like the edges and in just random areas all over the box. I really could have added more of this. I didn't get as much chippiness as I wanted, but this is the first time I've ever done it, so I really didn't know, what to expect, how much to put on, and I didn't want to overdo it. So I'm just kind of randomly rubbing this on, especially on the corners and the edges. So now I'm painting the entire exterior a coat of the color Sea Glass. While I wait for that to dry, I'm using my Rust-Oleum chalked aged glaze on 2 more of these wood planks from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to coat this on all the front and back and all the sides except the one side in the middle where I'm going to join these 2 planks together, and I'll be attaching these to the bottom of the box. So now it's time to start chipping away. I've got a little scraper here and I'm just going over all the sections on here trying to find all those little places where the candle wax was, and that paint just easily chips away and gives this a really cute rustic finish. I also use some fine grit sandpaper, especially around the edges, just to help kind of move this process along. Now back to those wood planks. I'm going to dry brush on a little bit of the buttercream just to give it more of a weathered look. This is going to be on the bottom of the box, so it's almost like a wood porch around the box, only it's really just kind of in the front. There's very little on the sides or the back. And so now it's time for glue. I am going to glue these together. Like I said, that portion on each one I left unstained so that it would adhere as well as possible. I'm just going to push those together and hold them for a few minutes. And now I am going to work on making a handle for my barn door. So I've got some IOD Air Dry Clay. I'm just rolling it into a little, like a caterpillar or an inchworm kind of thing. And I'm just going to mess with it and get it in the shape I want. And then I'm going to leave it on there and let it dry that way for a while so that I can paint it without distorting it. When it was dry, I wanted to paint it with this silver metallic shimmering silver as a base coat because I envision this as being, you know, a piece that was metal underneath and then they painted it black on top, and so a lot of that black has worn off and some of this shows through. So then I go in with my black acrylic paint to cover most of it, but I'm still leaving some of that silver showing through. And now I need to add a little bit of rust to this, so I'm using my burnt sienna, just adding a little bit here and there to give it some rusty goodness as if it has been out in the weather for a really long time. I'm attaching that with some of my Gorilla Wood glue, and then we can move on to the next step, which is adding the planks onto the bottom of this box. And here again with the wood glue, I'm just going to apply this to the bottom of the box and then set that on top of the two planks that are glued together. I want to make sure that I get the sides and the back pretty equidistant, you know, the same all the way around except for the front. I want that part to stick out further. That's going to be my little front porch for a few little decorative accents. I have a mini wooden flower pot from the Dollar Tree, and I'm watering down my antique wax so that I can brush this on like a stain and then wipe back the excess. When that was dry, I just did some dry brushing with Dixie Belle's Buttercream chalk paint. Then I drilled a hole down in the center of this because the base came up pretty high and I want to be able to attach some florals in here. So I thought that would be an easy way to get them to stick in there, and with my hot glue, it would keep them nice and secure. So I'm just going to go ahead and reinforce these with some more hot glue. I have one more little piece there off to the side that I want to add to this. And then I can add some Spanish moss, and this little piece will be ready to put on the front porch. I'm gluing this down with my Gorilla Wood glue, and I'm going to do the same with these two little wood slices that I also got from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to just randomly have them sitting there on the front porch next to the flower pot. Oh, and I forgot to mention, it's pretty important, all the items that are chalk painted that I haven't waxed do get a clear coat of the Rust-Oleum matte clear spray paint. Now I'm finally going to address that little wooden piece on the handle there. I just wanted to go ahead and use my antiquing wax on this, making sure I get it down into all those little grooves really well, wiping off the excess, more so around the raised areas than the recessed areas, so that it looks nice and worn. Once I had that all wiped down and I was happy with it, I wanted to secure this little wood piece on here because it just moved back and forth and I didn't like that. So I just stuck a little bit of hot glue in there to keep it secure. For the final step, I'm taking this twill tape and this little gingham ribbon. Both are from Hobby Lobby. And I'm going to make a little shaggy bow to attach to the top next to that little wooden piece on the handle. And I just realized I said shaggy bow, not shabby bow. Oh my God. Oh, I must have Scooby-Doo brain. Ruh-roh. So I cut the twill tape in half and then let me start over. I cut these in, I don't know, 4 or 5 inch lengths, and then I cut the twill tape in half so it was closer to the size of the gingham check ribbon. And then I just layered those one on top of the other in an X formation. Now I'm tying them together with some jute twine, and then I can kind of spread those out. And then I'm just going to hot glue this little button on the center, and I will using that twine, I tie it on there, but then I trim off the ends, and then I use my hot glue to attach it more securely next to that little handle. So that's how this little box turned out. And now we can take a look at all of the projects. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you saw something here today that has inspired you to go create something. See you next time.